Good morning, family. Jesus, during his earthly ministry, he commissioned, he called, he chose 12 disciples. 12 disciples. At your table, I want you to see how many of those 12 you can name off the top of your head. Go. Do it. Talk at your table. See if you can figure it out. How many of the 12 can you actually name? You got about 30 more seconds. I've heard your table. They're not all right. Barnabas was not one of the original, but it was good. All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up. All right, here's my question. As you're coming up with answers, which ones came to mind first? Which ones came to mind right away? I heard Judas, right? We remember Judas because Jesus invested him and he used it to really mess it up. And then I heard the other two I was expecting to hear, and that was Peter and John, because Jesus invested it a lot into them and they did so much good with it. In fact, we could argue that's probably why we're all sitting here today, is because of what guys like Peter and John did as a result of what Jesus poured into them. And you just tested a theory I have, and that is that most of us, those are the ones we can remember right away. The guy who did something awful with what Jesus poured into him, but then the two guys who changed the world because of what Jesus invested into them. And so I'm going to talk about something that's close to my heart this morning, and that is mentorship. But it's not by any means a new idea. And I think we need to first understand that Jesus did it. And I think it's fascinating. We're going to test out some technology today here, so we'll see if this works here. So let's say this. Jesus, we know he had the kind of this outside circle of influence. He had the multitudes. Okay, we know thousands of people would come and sit down and they would hear what Jesus had to teach. They would hear what he had to preach, and then they would sometimes eat a nice meal and go home. And so there was multitudes that would learn from Jesus and be taught by Jesus. We also know that Scripture tells us, let's see if I can do this. Let's say he had the circle of at least about 120 people who followed him pretty much wherever he went. And they kind of got the bonus teachings. I mean, they got the extra DVD features. They got to hear what Jesus had to say when the crowds left and the teachings he had. And this was even a group that perhaps he would challenge from time to time and give them kind of some homework assignments and see what they would learn with that. And by the way, I find this no different than what we do here. Right? I mean, we're going to show up tomorrow morning. There'll be maybe about 2,500 or more people on our campus. There will be a multitude, and to hear a sermon, a message, to be inspired by that, and then they'll go home. There's going to be, I would call, ministry communities, circles, men's breakfast, where we're going to have 100 or so people who are going to kind of sit down, maybe dig a little deeper, and get some interesting knowledge and have those communities as well. And then I think Jesus picked his own small group of 12 guys. And now these guys, they got the lessons. I mean, Jesus really poured into them, really taught them stuff, not just taught things, but explained things, challenged them. They got to see what he did. But then Jesus took it another step further. And we know that there's three guys whose names appear over and over together, and you mentioned two of them at least, Peter, James, and John. And I would say there's two even out of that three that stick out, and that's Peter. There's my little mark for him. This is John. Does that work? Okay, there we go. Here's what I think is fascinating. If you were to look at the person of Peter in comparison to the person of John, you would find two complete polar opposites. I mean, we know Peter, we know he's the impetuous one. He's the sanguine personality. He's the guy who's going to leap, right? Literally, walk on water, whatever, before he thinks. He's the guy, he's going to be the party animal. He's going to get a good time started, and he's going to lead it. And wisdom is not number one in his wheelhouse. I mean, he's going to jump into things. He's going to be very excited about things. He's probably going to be the extrovert, from what we see over and over in his personality. And then as we look at kind of a character study of John, who he is in the Bible, you see a polar opposite. He would be the melancholy personality, the perfectionist. He's the guy who's going to be probably a little more introverted. He is going to be wise, but he might be a little slow to speak out in that wisdom. And you see these two different personalities. I would say, too, it reflected in what we'd call their love languages. I would say that you could probably make a case that Peter was a words of affirmation guy, that Jesus would when he would speak into Peter and really grab his attention, it would be through words, and it would be like, let's just walk through what you said, let's walk through what I said. With John, I think it was more the quality time or the touch. I mean, it meant a lot for John to lean against Jesus, to be with Jesus, to be paced with and walk next to Jesus. And I think Jesus knew this about the two personalities, because here's the deal. They're two polar opposite personalities, yet they both go on to do amazing things for Jesus in the kingdom, and if they didn't, we may not be sitting here this morning. So how do they do it? Did they get that knowledge? Did they get that challenge when they sat and heard Jesus preach a good sermon? Did they get that kind of thing that challenged them, how they were moved in because they attended a men's breakfast? Was it in the group when Jesus was teaching the other 12 guys that it really spoke to them and they decided to take the initiative? I would argue it was in the one-on-one relationship Jesus had with these guys that he was able to peel back the layers of who they were based off how they were designed and then spur them on to do great things as they were designed to do. And that he spent the majority of his time and the majority of his effort in this mentorship type relationship with these guys. I think there might be an argument that maybe that's why John lived longer. I mean, if you think about it, when you look at the relationship of Jesus and Peter, he's always reining Peter in. Peter's always jumping forward, so Jesus says, this is a teachable moment. You just fell on your face. Let's use this as a teachable moment. Let's walk through this. And he would take the time to do that, and Peter would be receptive to that. John seemed to take a little more prodding. John, need to loosen up, need to be led by the Spirit. So much by the end of his life, he writes a whole book where he's led by the Spirit in Revelation. But perhaps that's why he lived longer, because he needed more time to get the prodding, because of how he was designed, and Jesus knew it. That's a technique that Jesus used. Jesus used mentorship. And I mean, none of us, we're probably going, James, son of Alphaeus, that's my first pick as a disciple. I mean, James, I'm sure we know he did some great things, but not to the level of Peter and John. Why? Because of the approach Jesus used with them, this one-on-one approach, and we get to see it through Scripture. I get this question a lot, especially when I had the discipleship title in my job description. And that is, Tom, how can I go deeper in my walk? And usually it's a leading question, because it's going, Tom, how can you make me go deeper in my walk? And I think we need a deeper group or deeper messages on Sunday morning, or deeper, talks on men's breakfast. And a lot of times that's where it's leading. It's like, how can you make me go deeper in my faith? And so I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. It's not better sermons from myself or Kurt or anybody else who hits the stage that's going to help you have a deeper relationship with God and go into discipleship. It's not any better message you're going to hear and experience within a circle like men's breakfast. It's not a deeper group. It's not a deeper group. To me, there's the irony. Sometimes I'll get like, I need a group that thinks more like me and, it values the Bible and digs deeper into this more like I would. And I'm thinking, ironically, that's probably the opposite of what you need. You need people who are different, who can actually challenge you. But either way, the answer is not a deeper group. I have another theory, but I think I can back it up pretty strongly, that if you really want to go deeper in your faith, if you really want to go deeper in your relationship with Jesus, it is going to require at least 2 life adjustments. The first is this, a relational adjustment. If you want more intimacy in your relationship with Jesus, it will require a more intimate relationship to get there. It will require a smaller circle. It will require bringing somebody along with you on the journey, whether you are the mentor or bring someone on the journey who is the mentee, who can help you peel back the layers of the onion to get down to who you were, who can take the time to focus on how God wired you and then how that plays out in your mission to them. To do what Jesus did with Peter, to do what Jesus did with John, to take the time to get really specific and focus in. It'll require that relational adjustment. The other adjustment it will require, and if you're not there yet, mentorship can help you get there, it's an attitude adjustment. Spiritual depth comes with an attitude adjustment. Let me explain. Most of us, when we start in our relationship with Jesus, and I think this is totally normal, it's about what can we get That's why we ask Jesus. We want the salvation. We want the heaven. We want, all these great benefits that come with Jesus. The problem is a lot of us get stuck there. A lot of us, that is our attitude when we come to church. And so you know it, and you'll catch yourself in it if you're going home at the end of Sunday and you go, man, I wish they didn't sing those songs, or I wish they did it at a different pace, or I wish they did it at a different volume, or I wish the sermon was more like this, and I wish this. Because the problem about, if you go, what can you get? The standard is always your expectations. The standard is always your preferences. And if the standard is always your expectations and your preferences, then you will always be disappointed. And what happens, and we see it over and over, I've seen it in ministry, is we have guys who it's about the preferences, and they'll go home and they'll be grumpy and they'll argue everything because it didn't meet their preferences, and eventually they'll leave the church, probably an average of 1 to every 3 years. They will leave the church, they will go to another church that looks like they're more in line with their preferences, that looks like they're more in line with the things, what they want to get. But guess what? Eventually they'll figure out after 1 to 3 years that nope, it's just as disappointing, and they'll go to another church, and they'll go to another church, and they'll never grow past themselves because they become the lid, because it's about what can I get in those expectations. And that's an okay place to start. It's not an okay place to get stuck. You see, if we can shift our attitude from a what can I get, and by the way, here's a Tom tangent. The day we ask Jesus to be Lord and Savior of our life is the day we die to ourselves, and the day that our preferences no longer matter. It's the day that worship no longer became about us and what we care about and how we think it should sound. We get all that in heaven. In the meantime, it's all about what does he want. So if we want to make the attitude adjustment, it's got to go. It has to go. If you want depth, if you really want depth, it has to adjust from a what can I get to a what can I give. And all of a sudden, there's room. There's room to grow because it's no longer bound by your expectations. It's all of a sudden bound by God's expectations. And guess what? They are way far away. Good luck meeting them. Okay, good luck. But there's room to grow when you can come on Sunday morning and be, what can I get out of this? Or I get to praise God. God gets to speak into my life. God gets to challenge me. God gets to move me closer and closer to his expectations. All of a sudden, there's room to grow. There's no more lid, and there's the possibility of depth. The beauty of the mentorship relationship is you can have that intimacy where you can peel back the things that are in the way of you, which is most often you, and you can open it up for depth of what does God want to do. I get this question a lot with the mentorship thing, and that is, how do I know I'm ready? How do I know I'm ready for this kind of relationship, to strip away the layers of the onion, to go go a little deeper? Proverbs chapter 1, verse 5, it says this. It says, a wise man will hear and increase in learning, and a man of understanding will acquire, I want you to hear that word, will acquire wise counsel. I believe this is a truth. Mentorship is beneficial for everyone, but not everyone is ready for it. I'll say that again. Mentorship is beneficial for everyone. Every single one of us in this room, you can benefit from mentoring somebody or having somebody mentor you, but not every single one of you are ready for it. Let me explain. A couple summers ago, we had family passes to Legoland. The beauty about Legoland is that pass would get you into the amusement park with the roller coasters, but it also gets you into the water park. And so when summer hits in Florida and it's super hot and you don't want to wait in any lines, we would just beeline it straight to the water park. My family and I, we'd enjoy these summer days at the water park, and they always had this slide that's there. It's in every water park I've ever seen. I can't remember what it's called. I'm just going to call it the Wedgeinator. Okay, it's you know what I'm talking about. It's the one, you climb story after story to get to the top of it, and it's this one steep drop, and you slide down it and stand up a soprano. It's the Wedgeinator. And so, but it's kind of, if you're a guy especially, it's kind of like, I got to conquer that. I have to do that because it's there for me to conquer. And now I have two boys. One is a lot more like John, and one's a lot more like Peter. And so I have the older son, Parker. He's more like John. He's the guy who's going to think through it before he leaps. He's going to go, I don't know about this. He's going to approach it more cautiously. I have the middle son, Mason, who's like, let's do this and see what happens, and then we'll put a Band-Aid on it. And he's that kind of kid. He's the Peter in the situation. And I noticed that it was towards the end of summer, and my oldest son, Parker, he became tall enough to ride the Wedgenator, to do the slide. He qualified for that. And so it was our last day, kind of the last day before the water park was closing down. And I told my son, I said, just so you know, you're now tall enough. You meet the height requirement to ride this slide. And I could see it kind of going through his head. In the meantime, his brother's jumping. He's like, I want to ride it. I want to ride it. I'm like, I'm sorry, Mason, you're not tall enough. You don't meet the requirements yet to meet the slide. I'm sorry about that. Maybe next summer. And I believe he would. There's not a bone in my body that doubts that he would go up there and ride the slide. But he just didn't meet the requirements. Where Parker, he met the requirements, but he had to decide something. And I told him, I said, Parker, you meet the requirements, and I'll just tell you, it's a great ride. But if you want to take the ride, it's not a double. It's not like Dad gets to sit next to you or with you. You have to walk up those steps by yourself, hop on the slide, and start moving down it. And it took moments. Actually, I think we had to ride some other rides before he said, you know what, I want to do it. And he did. Now, you could tell he's nervous. And he climbed up the top, and he did it, and looked down, and, we're all at the bottom, waving as ants in the distance, and he took it, and he did it, and then he did it again, and then he did it again. He did it for the rest of the day. He thought it was the greatest ride ever. But that's mentorship. That's mentorship. There's some requirements, and there's some courage. That's how you know you're ready. Let me walk you through this a little bit. By the way, I should probably tell you, we wrote a book about this. Me and another guy who have valued this, have used this in our ministries, and thought it would be a great tool for other people to use. And in this book, MentorU, in the introduction, we wrote what we thought were ways to determine qualifications or requirements, how you could kind of best evaluate if you or the other person is ready for mentorship. I want to clarify this, too. Our idea of mentorship is not that we match you up. We're not going to match you up. I'm going to give you two reasons. The first is this. Because anybody I've ever matched up, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't work out in that mentorship. You know why? Because I don't know you as well as you know you. And I don't know them as well as they know them, or as well as you might know them. And so for me, it's a doubly blind person trying to put two people together who I know less about than the two people involved. In fact, my theory is this: you are in the best situation to look around your life just with a slightly different perspective and find the best person to mentor or the best person to mentor you. You just got to look at it differently. It's kind of like when my kids are searching for something in their room and they're like, we can't find it, it must be lost forever. I'm like, did you look under the bed? Well, I didn't look under the bed. Okay, oh, there it is. The person is there. It's just a matter of how you look for them. Well, we want to help you make a clear decision, so we just did a quick questions you could ask yourself. We took clear as an acrostic. And the C is this: somebody in my life I naturally connect with. In other words, when I hang out with this person, it's not too hard to talk. It's not too awkward. They don't make me feel bad about myself. It's to look around your life, maybe even person at your table, maybe somebody in your group, but you look around your life and go, who do I just kind of naturally connect with? Check, okay? And L, there we go. Who's somebody I could learn something from? Or who's somebody who could learn something from me? It doesn't have to be everything. I mean, you don't have to pick the wise old owl who you're going to learn everything from, but it might be somebody who you seem like, man, that person really does this well. I'd like to learn how to do that well and to do that. Or this person, they have all the potential. I do this well. I could instill these skills into them. Maybe they'd be willing to learn. The E is excited. Who's somebody I would be excited about? I mean, if you're going into it dragging your feet, you're not ready. If you got a little energy going into this, going, man, I want to see what I can learn. I want to see, how this relationship can go. I want to see what they could learn and how I could contribute into their life. So some excitement. The next one is A, authentic. Authentic. In other words, is this person honest about who they are? Or is this person always trying to pretend to be someone they're not? Well, then you don't want them to mentor you, and you definitely don't want to mentor them. But I'm going to use a personal example. I had a friend, longtime friend, know this guy for years. And he asked me specifically, he said, Tom, would you mentor me? And I said, well, let's meet. And so we met, and we and I had MentorU too, and I kind of was going down through. I connect with this guy. This guy definitely had some things I could probably help him with, and he could learn from me. There's a natural energy we have and excitement we have around each other. But I got to this A part, and I knew it going into it. This is where I was a bit concerned. And so I asked him one question. I said, if you can answer me this one question, I'll mentor you. And I asked him, I said, what is your signature sin? He's like, what in the world do you mean by that? What do you mean signature sin? I said, I think, and the Bible kind of speaks to this too, we all have at least one sin that we consistently struggle with, that if Satan totally got a hold of it, he would destroy our lives if he hasn't done so already with it. That there's at least one that man could get us. And he couldn't think of a single one. He couldn't. And I knew that. I knew that was a problem. And I was waiting for him to say pride. And I knew if we could get there, then we could do the further work. But if not, if he couldn't get there, if he can't be real with himself, well, then I can't help him. We can't peel back the layers of the onion. They're too thick. They're too deep. He's got to take care of that before we can actually do some real work. And so it'd be a waste of his time. It'd be a waste of my time, and we both just get frustrated. And so I had to say, man, I love you, but until you can come back with an answer to that question, we can't do this kind of thing. Not in this type of relationship. I'll be there as your friend. We'll have all this, but we're not going to go there in mentorship. The R in clear is reliable. In other words, you want to make sure we say, hey, you want to meet up and do this? And how about Tuesday? That they would show up kind of thing and do that. And so I challenge as you look around the people within your life to see, this is the height requirement. Is this somebody I connect with? Is this somebody I can learn from or they can learn from me? Is this somebody who I'd be excited to spend some time with? Is this somebody who's authentic, who they're already pretty real with themselves, so we could really dig deep here? Or is this somebody who's going to actually show up, be reliable, and take this seriously? And I challenge you to use that as you think about people in your life that maybe you can mentor or maybe can mentor you. We're not going to match you up. One, because you're in the best situation to find these people and to evaluate it by that. But also this too. I'm not going to match you up because you have to man up. That's part of it. Okay? If I match you up and it doesn't go well, it could be because you didn't put forth the effort into it, but you have me to fall back on and blame and say, well, Tom did a terrible work moving into it. Okay? Mentorship is not easy. I don't expect this whole room to go out and take this on and do this, because it's not for the weak right now. It's not for those or the people who are intimidated by a challenge. It's not for that. I have no quota to fill, by the way. This is something we thought would be beneficial, and so it's for those who want it, and you're ready for it if you want it enough to have the courage to climb up the ladder and start sliding down. That's how you know you're ready for it. That if you have the courage to make the decision, to do the matchup. Now, we know mentorships work. I was thinking about this the other day. How many mountains did John and Peter have to climb to get that special message from Jesus? Think about it. How many times did they have to climb up a mountain to be the ones to get to see Jesus transfigured? How many mountains did they have to climb to be the ones to see Jesus ascend and get those special lessons along the way and get the commissions and to do that? How many miles did they have to run to be the two that were at the empty tomb to get to see that Jesus sure enough was risen? How many mountains and paths did they have to climb to be at the foot of the cross and watch him die close enough that John could become the surrogate son of Mary? I mean, it took work. They had to go the extra distance to have the extra intimacy. They had to climb a little more mountains than the rest of them. I would argue they had to fall a little more than the other guys. How many times do we see Peter mess it up and have this humiliating experience, and Jesus comes around and teaches him through it? How many times did they had to publicly fall in order to be poured into by Jesus? And I would argue this: mentorship is going to be work. There's going to be some climbing, and there's going to be some falling, and Jesus uses all of it. But it requires that type of work. Let me ask you this. Anybody in here in an arranged marriage? Anybody? Your parents picked out your bride, right? Okay. No, there's a reason. If given the choice, we want to choose. I will say this. You're ready when you're ready to ask the person, hey, will you mentor me? When you have the courage to ask, or hey, would you mind considering maybe me mentoring you. I've been in a mentor relationship with Jared Kidwell for the past year and a half. I remember the day I asked Jared if he'd let me mentor him, because I was so nervous, like a little girl. It was like asking a girl out. It really was. What if he says no? What if he doesn't like me? What if it's I really think that's a good indicator. That's a good indicator. Just like going on the date with the girl. If you have the courage to ask her, then you're ready to go on the date, kind of thing, because you don't know what she's going to say. If you can get over the fear of rejection and man up and do it, then you know you're ready to climb to the top of the slide and start going down. And so I think you're ready when you can look at the people in your life and see these requirements, and then if you have the courage to ask and to do that. Now what I think I have for you this morning is the slide. What I think I have for you this morning is the ride that you take. And I think it's an exhilarating ride, and I think it's totally manageable. And so if you're at the point where you're ready and you want to take this leap and to do this, I think you can do this. And by the way, the beauty of what I think we created here with MentorU is nobody in this room or nobody you ask has to play the role of the expert. They wouldn't do it well anyway, because the other truth we know is that Jesus is always the standard. The point of mentorship isn't to become more like your mentor. The point of mentorship is for the mentor and the mentee to become more and more like Jesus. And to take that path together. The mentor may just be a few steps ahead. The mentor may be able to help learn some things along the way, but the mentor is going to learn too. The standard in mentorship isn't the mentor, it's Jesus. We built something that we think leads to following Jesus and lets him be the expert, and the other two get to go along on the journey. And so that's kind of how we built it, and I think we have a great exhilarating ride. I think when you look into Matthew chapter 28, when he gives that last commission to his disciples before he ascends into heaven, and he says, go into all the world, make disciples, baptizing them, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded. He doesn't say, hey, just you guys who are really good at making disciples. You take on the disciple making. The rest of you, arts and crafts. The other ones, you're building projects. No. He's going, if you're going to be my disciple, then you need to disciple all of you. Not just the ones who think they're really good at it, not just the ones who are really good at it. No, the implication is if we're following Jesus, then we're all capable of doing it at some level. Then we all have something to offer somebody else in their walk with Jesus. And so if you have the courage to ride the ride, I think I have the slide for you, that you can take this, you can use this. You just have to be willing to, one, find somebody to ride the slide with you, and get a book is really it. The whole reason we built this was because we couldn't find what we were looking for, so we just created it. And that was kind of that first step to just get the mentorship relationship going and get it headed into a direction that by the time you're done with this, your next step for the mentor and the mentee. And that's what we tried to build. And we built a 6-session thing that we believe that if you're ready to do this and you find somebody to do this with you, you just grab a book. Neither one of you has to be the expert. You just got to go on the ride together and give it a whirl. A couple tips I'll give you, just kind of going into it if you want to do this, is take your time, let it be organic. I mean, like I said, we have no quota to fill. I think I talked to somebody this morning who's been doing it with their mentor, and he's like, man, we're just like going off on tangents and taking our, we're not knocking it out in 6 meetings kind of thing. We're knocking it out in like 6 months. Jared and I did the same thing. Like, it's a good thing because we could just milk these things. We could just really get intimate with these things. We could really dig deep. We can peel back. That's what it's for. That's the beauty of mentorship. That you can go at whatever pace it takes. The other thing, too, I want to, maybe this is a relief for your mind, too, is that I would argue mentorship is often seasonal. It's often seasonal. I've had a lot of great mentors in my life at different pivotal points in my life. They weren't the same ones necessarily all the way through. Ray mentioned, I asked Ray, I think it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, there's something I saw Ray was really good at doing, still think he's really great at doing it, and I was like, I just want to learn that from Ray. And so we kind of walked through some specific things through it that I wanted to learn and grow in and do that. And it was, I think it was after about a year and a half or 2 years, I was like, okay, Ray, I want to go learn this, but that means I got to wrap this up. And Ray in all his wisdom said to me, you know what, Tom, if you weren't growing, if you weren't learning, if you weren't applying these things, then there would be no reason for you to move on. That's part of it. kind of thing, to find the next challenge, to find the next person to learn from. And that's the beauty of mentorship. Sometimes I think we get, oh no, if I do this, I'm locking in for life with this person. And, what if they can, you're not. That's the beauty of mentorship. It's the beauty of growth, is that it has the flexibility. What you're doing is taking a step going, I'm going to give this a whirl and see how much I can learn on the journey, and let it take me where it's going to take me from there. My challenge is to give it a try, to give it a whirl, to go on the ride and see if it's great. I think it is. I think you'll see what John and Peter got to see, that it's a meaningful way to spend your time. It's a way to grow deeper. It's a way to be more challenged. It's a way to be more used by God. It's a way to help make an actual difference in this world. And really, I think at the end of the day, you get to decide, do I want to be the Bartholomew? Do I want to be the Thaddeus? Do I want to be James, son of Alphaeus? Or do I want to be a Peter or a John?